Today, we're taking a closer look at the tragic collision on the Karimat highway. What we're going to do is break down the reported facts to piece together exactly what happened, what the human cost was, and the massive emergency response that it triggered. So let's get right into it. So, what are we talking about here? At its core, this was just a devastating multi-vehicle crash. You've got a tour bus packed with passengers, a big transport truck, and then a second transport truck? That combination alone tells you this wasn't just a simple accident, but a massive and incredibly complex emergency scene. All right, Section 1, a tragic collision. First things first, let's just establish the basic facts of what happened, and, just as importantly, where. The location here is a really big piece of the puzzle. This all went down on the Karimat Desert Highway, which is a major transportation artery. So you've got to picture it. High speeds, a ton of heavy commercial traffic, and it's all happening in a pretty remote setting. All of those factors make an incident like this so much more complicated from the very first minute. So these were the vehicles involved in this catastrophic pileup. You have one tour bus, and on the other side, two heavy transport trucks. It's that specific, terrible combination, a vehicle full of people against the sheer mass and force of two commercial trucks, that really explains why this crash was so incredibly severe. Okay, Section 2, counting the fatalities. This is the tough part. We're going to look at the human cost and trace how the official number of victims was actually determined as the situation unfolded. In the immediate chaos of a major crash, the first bits of information are almost never the full story. And that was the case here. The first number that came out from emergency crews right there at the scene was 7 fatalities. But sadly, their search was far from over. As rescuers kept working, sifting through the terrible wreckage of that tour bus, they made a heartbreaking discovery. That initial count of 7, it was, tragically, about to go up. Rescue workers found 2 more victims inside the bus. This brought the final confirmed number of people who lost their lives to 9. The victims were then transported to 2 different facilities. You can see here, the initial 7 were taken to Atfi Hospital. The 2 who were discovered later were sent to Al-Wasta Hospital. Right away, this split starts to give you a hint of the logistical challenge the response teams were facing. All right, Section 3, the injured and their care. Because beyond the fatalities, there was this whole other side to the tragedy, which was the massive medical response needed for all the survivors. A staggering 29 people survived the crash, but were injured and needed treatment. For the first responders, that meant trying to triage and transport a huge number of patients, all from that one incredibly chaotic scene. So how do you handle that? Well, they had to split the injured between 2 different hospitals, Beni Suef University Hospital and Al-Wasta Central Hospital. Just try to imagine the on-the-ground coordination it would take to get 29 injured people to the right place for the right care, all at once. And that brings us to our final section, the emergency response. Let's put all these numbers together now just to really appreciate the full scale of what these emergency teams were dealing with. To really wrap your head around the size of this crisis, you can't look at fatalities or injuries by themselves. You really have to combine them to get the total number of people that emergency crews had to account for at the scene. And that number is 38. 38 total casualties. That's every single person, whether they were injured or deceased, involved in this one crash. It's such a powerful number, and it really summarizes the true scale of this tragedy. And think about this for a second. When you add up the destinations for the injured and the deceased, you find that the casualties from this single crash were spread across 4 different medical facilities. That is an absolutely massive operational challenge. And this really leads us to the central question, doesn't it? We've laid out the facts, the vehicles, the location, the numbers, but the real story is in the response. How on earth do you coordinate triage, transport, and care across 4 separate hospitals all at the same time, right in the middle of a crisis? It's a sobering reminder of the incredible complexity these teams face. Thanks for joining us for this